What's up, guys? Blade Master here. You're watching the Wolf of Remus Total War channel, and today I'm bringing you something a little different. The Emperor's Edition update saw Spear units get a much more important role in matches, so I thought it would be pretty useful to see how best to use them and to get the most out of them. This video will show you what the results are of charging Elite Spears into melee infantry, of putting Shield Wall immediately, and of doing a combination of both charging and then putting Shield Wall. I've used two elite tier spear units, Noble Spears of the Arverni and Shield Bearers from Seleucids. I took Noble Spears because they are a good representation of barbarian elite spears, and Shield Bearers because while they aren't the most strong elite level Hellenic spear unit, they are the closest in cost to Noble Spears. I've tested them against Lusitani Nobles, again because these are units that are very strong in melee and they're pretty representative of a true elite tier sword infantry. They don't bother with much armor or shields, but what they do have is incredible melee skills. So it'll be easier for me to isolate the melee skills of both spear infantry and sword infantry. I've done 3 tests for each spear unit. The first will be them charging head-on into Lusitani Nobles. The second would be forming a shield wall and bracing for the Lusitani Noble charge. And the third will be them initially charging onto the Lusitani Nobles and then forming a shield wall once they've engaged. Now, before I start with the tests, I will go over each unit stats with a bit of detail. So if you want to skip ahead to the tests, click the box on the top right of your screen now. Now let's take a look at the stats for the Spear Nobles of the Arverni. Now, Spear Nobles have a pretty decent melee attack at 34. Nothing great, but it'll get the job done. Weapon damage at 30 is quite strong, out of which 6 is armor piercing, which is pretty decent. Their bonus versus large at 15 is good, but it's not, compared to Hellenic troops which have a 20 bonus versus large, it's slightly lacking. What bonus versus large does is it increases the melee attack for these units against any cavalry or elephant. They also have a charge bonus, which is quite heavy at 32, and they have a melee defense stat at 77, which is obviously really high. Their armor at 75 is kind of lacking. It's strong, but for a unit that costs so much, it's a bit less. Their health at 65 and their base morale at 70 is just absolutely incredible though. Now, coming into their abilities, they have something called Shield Screen, which is basically the barbarian version of the Hoplite Phalanx. What it does is it increases bracing, shield strength, and I think melee defense. Yeah, it gives a huge boost to melee defense. But the unit can't move in the process. We'll test out to see how effective that strategy is. Now, Cavalry Counter Tactics is another unique ability that they have. What it does is for an extended period of time, it increases their melee attack for cavalry units by quite a big amount. You see it's at 15 base level, but once you turn on Cavalry Counter Tactics, for elite level spear units, it goes all the way up to like 40, something like that. I could be wrong. But it's definitely something very useful when you engage cavalry, like incredibly useful. On top of that, they have expert charge defense. Now, this is very interesting actually. What it does is it increases the unit's melee attack and weapon damage against any unit that charges it. And you'll be able to see that this plays out pretty interestingly in these guys' battles. On top of that, they also have the encourage ability, which is just a general trait which is given to most incredibly expensive units. And what it does is it increases morale of all the surrounding units next to it. Now let's take a look at the Shield Bearers stats. One general thing about elite level Hellenic spear troops is they have much higher armor and slightly higher melee attack than barbarian spear troops, but they trade this off for much lower melee defense. So as you can see, melee attack at 41 is higher than noble spears. Weapon damage at 29 is slightly lower, and that's one less armor piercing damage that they have. Their bonus versus large is a flat 20. They don't have cavalry counter tactics, but they just have a 5 passive bonus versus large to compensate for that. They also have slightly lower charge bonus of 28. Their melee defense at 57 is obviously like 20 points lower than the 77 melee defense that Spear Nobles have. But their armor at 115 is much higher. It's that's like 40 points higher than the Spear Nobles armor. And they have similar health and base morale. Now, the only unique ability that they have is the Hoplite Phalanx. And of course, what that does is, as we all know, it increases their bracing, it increases shield strength. But what it doesn't do is, it increases melee defense as well. but it doesn't increase it by nearly the same amount as shield screen does. So hoplite phalanx, while it does increase their bracing and shield strength and stuff like that, the increase to melee defense isn't nearly as high as shield screen. On the other hand, they can move, whereas in shield screen you can't move, but they can move very slow. On top of that, they also have expert charge defense. Now, this is another trait which is available for most elite level spear troops. They do have the discipline trait, which means that they don't suffer morale loss when their general is dead. On top of that, they have the general, they have the encourageability, and they also have formation attack, which, as we all know, formation attack enables units to last for a much longer time because they will stay in formation, so fewer of them will be engaged in melee at one time. So this is going to be the first test of the Spear Nobles, and in this one they're going to charge straight into Lusitani Nobles. I put this on unit size of extreme, so it's going to be 160 units versus 160 units, and obviously I'm not going to show the entire fight here, it's going to be fast forwarded, but just so you guys know, the fight took a total of 4 minutes and 44 seconds, and some important things about that experiment is the Spear Nobles got 10 to 12 kills of Lusitani Nobles right off the charge, which just kind of proves that their charge is quite powerful. That 32 charge bonus is the same as Lusitani Nobles, so it is a very powerful charge. On top of that, they have they have the expert charge defense, so it means that if Lusitani Nobles are charging them, they already get a boost to their melee attack and weapon damage, and pair that up with their already pretty powerful charge bonus, and that just means that they get a lot of kills right off the bat. At the end of the day, they killed 86 Lusitani Nobles, so they made a Lusitani Noble half strength before they routed. So kills of 86 and casualties of 136 in this battle. So let's move on to the second round of the Spear Nobles test. In this one, they're going to be popped into shield wall, and they're not going to counter charge or anything. They're just going to straight up take that charge from the Lusitani Nobles, and you can see that just from the javelin toss, they've lost about 7 men. And because they don't get a counter charge off, they lose that 32 charge bonus that they have, and so you will see that they lose a whole bunch of men without getting even a single kill. Specifically in the test that I did, they lost 20 men without a single kill. They lost 40 men and only managed 4 kills. But after the initial shock, they take a really long time to die, but they also take a long time to get kills. At the end of the day, they managed only 71 kills compared to the first round of 86, so they managed 15 fewer kills before routing. But what is the most important thing to note here, and probably what's going to be the most useful for anyone who's watching this, is that the fight took 25% longer than in the first round. So the first round lasted for 4 minutes and 44 seconds. In this, it lasted for 5 minutes and 58 seconds. So definitely some use in them holding out by putting them on the shield wall. So we know that when you initially pop shield wall, the units, they end up getting fewer kills, but they last 25% longer. So let's see what you can do with the combination of the two. When we use, in test number 3, where they initially get the charge off, they obtain all their charge bonuses, and thus you can see like 10 to 12 kills right off the charge. And then I popped in shield wall, and that just makes them so much harder to kill. In this fight, well, actually, let's take a look. Because they have that expert charge defense, the spears, and the most important thing is, while these guys do have expert charge defense, the Lusitani Nobles and basically every other elite tier sword unit don't have expert charge defense. So Spear Nobles will get a melee attack boost and a weapon damage boost, but Lusitani Nobles will not get that. So on top of their great charge, which they have already, they actually gain a second bonus using their expert charge defense trait. So at the end of the day, this was probably the closest battle for them. In the test that I conducted, the fight lasted for basically the same amount of time as round 1. So in this, the fight lasted for 4 minutes and 48 seconds. They managed 106 kills compared to 86 kills in round 1 and 71 kills in round 2. And they lost 129 casualties, or they lost 129 men. Other important points to this test: they got 15 kills off the charge, around 15 kills. And with only, so while they were at half strength, that is around 80, they were around 75 men out of 160. when they were at that level, they actually managed another 75 kills on Lusitani nobles. So it was incredibly close. When they were at half strength, they managed to bring the Lusitani nobles unit down to half strength as well. And it was only at like the final moments that the Lusitani nobles managed to win. And I think that's only because they managed to pop head on for a couple of times. So to summarize the effects of the three tests that I had conducted, it seems that if you're counting kills, the by far the most effective strategy is to first charge your spear nobles onto the enemy melee infantry, and then pop in shield wall once the charge's effects have been taken. So in the third round, where I charged the spear nobles onto Lusitani nobles, they got 106 kills and 100, and they suffered 129 casualties. Now, if you're thinking about length, and if you want to use the spear nobles as more of a holding force in your battle, then by far the best strategy is to use shield wall and let them brace for the initial charge. The trade-off is that they get far fewer kills. So in round 2, as you can see, I popped them onto a shield wall right before the Lusitani nobles charged in. So in this case, they only got 71 kills and suffered 132 casualties, but the length of the battle took 25% longer, so it was almost 6 minutes. And round 1, where they just straight up charged the Lusitani nobles, they got a lot more kills than if they had just popped shield wall. So they got 86 kills and they suffered 136 casualties. And what's interesting to note is that the length that it took for them to rout, which was 4 minutes and 44 seconds, is around the same amount of time that it took in round 3. So adding the shield wall once the charge has been completed doesn't really add any bonus in terms of how long it takes to rout these guys. So it's on to the shield bearers now, the Hellenic spear troop, and it is pretty interesting. This is going to be the first of 3 rounds or 3 tests that I completed with them, and in this one they're going to, just like the spear nobles, they're going to straight up charge into the Lusitani nobles. And what is really interesting is that in all the 3 tests, these guys took a lot longer to die, like a lot longer. The duration of the first round lasted for 7 minutes and 25 seconds. Now compare that with spear nobles when they charged in, and that was at 4 minutes and 44 seconds. So it's just incredibly, these guys are, as a staying power, they're incredibly more useful. Also, when they charged in straight into these Lusitani nobles, I wouldn't have expected this, but they did get more kills, but just slightly more kills than spear nobles. Although this doesn't really just prove anything, because like I said, it changes every time. It depends on, there's like this luck and probability factor in combat mechanics. So for the sake of telling everything, the kills in the first test that I conducted were 91. And they lost 136 men. Again, they routed. And but it was pretty close. I mean, this is compared to 86 kills in round 1 for the spear nobles test. So it is pretty comparable when both of them charge into Lusitani nobles. But I mean, we have to remember that spear nobles have a much better charge bonus. So their charge for the shield bearers was not nearly as strong. They only got 5 to 7 kills of Lusitani nobles off the charge, compared to at least 12 kills that the spear nobles got. So we know that shield bearers last a lot longer than spear nobles, but in terms of the kills that they managed to get, it's roughly the same when they charge into Lusitani nobles. So how will it differ if they move into hoplite phalanx? Well, this is again really interesting. When they moved into hoplite phalanx, the fight this is really counterintuitive, but the fight actually lasted for a shorter time. The fight lasted for 7 minutes and 8 seconds. Again, I don't know, maybe this was like a freak trial. I didn't like retry the experiment or anything. I mean, I don't really have the time to sit and watch people and count on my stopwatch for like 7 minutes time and time again. But yeah, when they moved into hoplite phalanx and they braced for impact, the fight lasted only for 7 minutes and 8 seconds. The kills were much lower than when they charged Lusitani nobles in round 1. In round 2, they killed only 80 Lusitani nobles, but they lost 133 men. So in when they moved into hoplite phalanx, the features are pretty similar. They lost 12 units on the charge, but they got 4 kills. Um, when they lost around 60 men, so that means when they were around 100 men out of 160, they got about around 40 kills of Lusitani nobles. And finally, when they were down to half strength, they got only 50 kills of Lusitani nobles. So somewhere, I think that's probably due to the fact that around 60 or sorry around the initial time when they got charged and the time when they lost like 60 men, that's probably when the headhunt effect from the Lusitani nobles wore down. So that could probably be the reason why they got a lot of kills during that time. But yeah, it's pretty interesting because it doesn't seem like Hoplite phalanx really matters when you're talking about elite level shield bearers and elite level spear troops. It doesn't really add anything in terms of kills or in terms of their staying power. Now we know that Hoplite phalanx on an elite level spear unit like shield bearers is not really very useful. But would it really, or would it help them if they initially charged and then braced by using a Hoplite phalanx? Well, let's take a look. This is round 3, by the way, and there you can see I've just put on the phalanx ability. So they got their 7 kills off the charge, and after that they're going to move into Hoplite phalanx. And the length of this battle lasted for 7 minutes and 41 seconds. So it did last quite a bit longer than the second round, and quite a bit longer than the first round as well. So this is 7 minutes and 41 seconds compared to 7 minutes and 8 seconds in the second round and 7 minutes and 25 seconds in the first round. This was a lot closer too. They got a total of 97 kills in one of the tests that I completed, and they lost 145 men. But in the second one, I think that's the one that's going to be showed on the replay here. The fight was just incredibly close. Like, they almost won against the Lusitani nobles. Like, they got them to waver. They got the Lusitani nobles to waver, and it was just a really close fight. And the other tests and the other unit didn't even come close to making the Lusitani nobles waver. So yeah, I mean, take from that what you will. It could be just the whole combat mechanics coming into question, but one thing's for sure, it definitely does look like among the three, putting your units into Hoplite phalanx immediately is not a good idea, and charging in and then popping Hoplite phalanx is definitely a good idea. So in terms of what you should do when you have shield bearers, the first choice would be to charge and then put Hoplite phalanx. The second option would be to just immediately charge them and just not do anything. And then the final thing would be to just let them, or to put Hoplite phalanx on them and then let them brace for a charge from melee infantry. Of course, the rules are completely changed when you're going to face cavalry. So, Professor Blademaster, what have we learned from these tests? Well, my dear student, from these tests, we have learned quite a few things. The first is that similarly priced barbarian spears and Hellenic spears have around the same effect, or do the same amount of damage, a very similar amount of damage against enemy melee infantry. We can see that despite the fact that shield bearers have got slightly higher kills than spear nobles across most of the tests, it is very comparable, and it's almost the same. The second thing we've learned is, while spear nobles and barbarian spears in general get more kills in a shorter period of time, their battles as well tend to last for a much shorter period of time. So we can see that across the 3 rounds, on average, the spear nobles lasted for around 5 minutes and maybe like 5 minutes and 10 seconds, something like that. Whereas the shield bearers lasted for an average of, this is probably like something like 7 minutes and 10-15 seconds. So a whole like 2 minutes extra across all the tests. So as a holding force, Hellenic spears are much better. But as a killing force, barbarian spears are better. Number 3, at the end of the day, which is the better spear unit? Well, it's kind of tough to answer that, but in my opinion, I would go with the shield bearers, because not only do they get a comparable amount of kills, but they also last for a much longer time, which is the main purpose of spear units. They are much more versatile because they have really high armor, which means that they can stand up to missiles for a much longer time. And they have formation attack, which could be very useful when you're bracing against enemy cavalry and stuff like that. When they're not, so closely packed together by default, they are a bit more susceptible to enemy cavalry charges. And I think they also have the discipline trait, which means that if their general dies, they don't suffer morale penalty, which is no, which is not applied for barbarian spears. One The final point that we've learned from these tests is that shield wall as an ability is a much more useful ability than hoplite phalanx. We could see from just the stat boost that hoplite phalanx just provides a very minor stat boost to melee defense, whereas shield wall provides like a 40 extra point bonus to melee defense, which proves that it's a much more useful ability. As we can see in round 2, where I popped shield wall on the spear nobles and they braced, the fight lasted for 25%, like I explained before. Sure, they got fewer kills, but they lasted for a much longer time. And finally, in round 3 for the spear nobles, when I charged them and then I popped shield wall on them, while the battle took the same amount of time as round 1, they got a whole bunch of more kills than they would have if they simply charged, or if they simply just braced for the impact with shield wall. Now, on the other hand, the hoplite phalanx didn't do nearly as much of, or didn't get nearly as much of an effect. We can see that in round 2 for the shield bearers, the length of the battle lasted for for less period of time than when they charged. And in general, even if they charged and then put hoplite phalanx, the time difference really didn't change. So as a holding force, they're just great in general, and you don't need to put hoplite phalanx. If you're thinking about kills, then it kind of helps. Actually, no, it helps. It definitely helps. That is, if you see round 3 when you charge your shield bearers and then put them into phalanx, it definitely is by far the most viable strategy when you're attacking enemy melee infantry. You can't see it from this test because they've got 97 kills and 145 casualties, but I did another test, and in that they almost killed off the Lustani nobles. So that's the end of this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. It was actually, even though it was really nerdy, it was kind of fun to do this test and just see how the mechanics of Rome 2 plays, especially among like these spear units, whom we all know that changed a whole lot after patch 15 came out. So if you want to see more of this, let me know. If you have any suggestions or criticisms to this test, let me know. And until next time, peace.